Chapter 5. Illuminating Facts. Dana Scully was growing restless and also a little irritated. She wanted to understand his nightmares, but with logical explanations, not fantasies created in the mind of a talented horror writer. Then what about those frightening images she experienced while he was missing? Why was she now denying she'd seen him suffer such similar trauma in her own imagination? The answer was, it had been a dream where her subconscious had simply been playing a cruel trick. However, the physical torture he'd undergone had clearly been evident when she'd found him lying on the ground, wrapped in a blanket, fellow FBI agents trying to pull her away from the horrifying discovery. Yes, those wounds had all been shockingly real. "Mulder, I remember during your examination," she faltered, picturing him lifeless, lying on an operating table in the hospital. Scully shuddered. "There was a deep gash that had been sliced from your sternum to your stomach." Noticing her blue eyes were now bright with unshod tears, he let out a long drawn-out breath. "Oh, that was the saw," he replied darkly. "They cut you open?" she asked, alarmed, though it was obvious that some sort of medical instrument had been used to perform such a task. Not to mention she'd witnessed this in her dreams. She chided herself for not thinking rationally. "Just stick with the facts, Dana." "Yeah," he hesitated and swallowed hard before continuing. "While I was still, conscious." "What?" Scully was not prepared for this eye-opener from him. "I don't think they knew what Novocaine was," he quipped, trying to lighten the sombre mood. It was either that or sink into complete despair. He did not wish to choose the latter. Scully had still been trying to come to terms with the fact this man had actually undergone such treatment, which was usually only performed on a cadaver. Now he was telling her the incision had been carried out whilst he was fully attentive and able to recognise what was happening. She felt a knot in the pit of her stomach. Oh, Jesus! Mulder was still reminiscing on the incident, whilst at the same time trying to distance himself from knowing it had been him experiencing this sickening surgical procedure. "I heard it," he began, words forming in staccato beats. "The noise of the machine. Metal rods. No, a metal arm came over me." Oh God, Scully thought, as the cruel hard facts now became glaringly evident. I saw this happening to him. They were not dreams. It actually happened. She braced herself because she knew what was coming next. Indeed, as he explained the horrific moments involving the soft palate of his mouth being drilled into, causing him to be almost lobotomized, as well as being practically eviscerated by that medieval bone saw, she felt her insides curdling. She could no longer deny that everything he'd described was identical to what she'd witnessed in her own imagination. Unable to hold back, she made a second attempt to offer him some comfort. This time he didn't object, as she gently encircled him in her arms. "I really could have done with some painkillers," he joked half-heartedly, whilst at the same time trying to keep himself from losing it completely. Scully felt his body shudder against her and gradually pulled him in as close as her distended belly would allow. "Oh, Mulder, it's okay. It's all over now." Allowing himself to be in her protective embrace for a few moments, he sadly realised her words held no conviction, because one way or another he knew that was far from the truth. But there was no point dwelling on that right now. No, he just had to concentrate on summoning up the strength to tell her the rest of his experience. "We haven't even gotten to the pièce de résistance yet," he claimed gently, withdrawing from her tender touch. "You would think slicing and dicing me would be enough," he said bitterly. "But no, that bastard metal arm returned, this time with 2 syringes. He stopped short, recalling this most frightening moment of all. An incident he'd repressed so deeply he'd actually forgotten about till this moment. "Least I think they were syringes." He briefly closed his eyes, shaking his head as the final leg of the ordeal shaped itself into conscious thought. The pain was already unbearable, but nothing compared to what followed next. Scully winced, then her medical training kicked into gear. "Mulder, the body can only undergo so much physical endurance, then it automatically shuts down. Surely you had to have passed out at some point," she stated, more than asking the question. "Well, no, actually I didn't," he replied, feeling intense waves of disgust wash over him. "Meaning what, exactly?" she queried. Let me finish telling you about the final instrument of torture, and I'll explain, he replied dryly. Where was I? Oh, yes, the needles. His words came out in ragged gasps. Mulder knew he was probably going to hyperventilate if he didn't stop this behaviour. Needles, Scully repeated. She could see from his expression that he really did not want to talk about this. Mulder sucked in deeply, then exhaled unsteadily before forcing himself to continue. 2 syringes with very, very sharp needles were at the end of it. Blinking away a few tears, he noticed Scully's face had gone rather pale while she waited for him to finish explaining this gruesome scenario of the contraption. They injected you, she asked. Her mind reverted to when she'd insisted on performing the inspection of his body against all sound judgment. It had been a painful decision to make, and the prospect that she might even have had to perform an autopsy on him had made her sick to her stomach. But she had also known that if she hadn't been the first to examine him, then the findings would have been overlooked, probably deliberately, by certain key figures in the government who did not want the truth revealed. But I never found any puncture wounds suggesting an injection of any kind, she stated. You wouldn't have, he replied, sniffing back a sob. What do you mean by that? She asked, puzzled. You wouldn't have detected the results of the damage it caused because... A brief hesitation, followed by another sniff. You would have had no reason to examine that particular part of my body. Now she became alarmed by his words. What? She asked, not really sure if she wanted to hear his answer. Mulder bit his lip as a tear began to fall down his cheek. My eyes, he replied miserably. Before Scully could even take in what he'd just said, he continued explaining, trying hard not to register the words that were now pouring out of his mouth. Another metallic gizmo appeared and clamped to my face like a metal vice. Forced my eyes open. I couldn't close them. Another movie came to mind and he blurted out a name. Like fucking Malcolm McDowell, only I wasn't being forced to watch depravity on a screen. Like who? Scully interrupted him, a bewildered look on her face. He snorted. Wow, you've never seen A Clockwork Orange? No, I haven't. Well, the apparatus was similar, he stressed harshly. Only unlike the film, this was used so they could send those things right into my... He paused, feeling like he was going to convulse at any moment. They plunged those things right into my fucking eyes, he yelled, slamming his fist down onto the couch. Oh my God, Scully gasped. He shook his head fiercely. I can't even describe that kind of pain, he stammered. In my mind I was crying out, please God, don't let them make me blind. But of course I couldn't yell at them to make it stop. Those damn hooks were still embedded in my fucking face. Tears were now coursing down his cheeks and he discovered he couldn't stop them. But he never heard my cries for help, and those extraterrestrial bastards let me endure it all. Every single moment of agonizing hell. I remained conscious throughout the whole thing, he exclaimed angrily. They put you through an unbelievable amount of trauma and didn't once allow you to pass out? Scully asked in complete and utter shock. You got it, he replied, feeling that at any moment he was going to heave his guts up. He swallowed back bile, which made him cough a little. Yes, he said, when he'd finally steadied himself. I went beyond the endurance of pain. And let me tell you, it's not the nicest of trips to go through, he admitted, wiping his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. Scully touched his elbow, which caused him to stop this frantic gesture. Mulder, I'm so sorry. Reaching up, she began to wipe the emotional evidence from his face, feeling the wetness of his tears on her fingertips as she did so. I just wish I could have stopped them from hurting you. I wish I'd been there for you. He felt a small bout of comfort from her touch, and lowering his head, rested his chin against her palm. He remained there for a few seconds, eyes closed, then brushed his lips against her hand. You're here now, he stated. Looking up, he gave a faint smile. That's all that matters. Leaning forward, he delivered the lightest kiss on her mouth. Do you want me to continue? She felt his lips tremble and returned the gesture. Only if you want to, she replied. Might as well. I'm on a roll now, he snickered, but the sadness still remained evident in his expression. Guess that was it, then. He noticed the frown on her face and added, I mean, I felt nothing after that. There was just darkness. Blackness. Nothing. Peace, maybe? Peace? She asked, confused. Yeah, I think that's where they must have finally succeeded in... His words trailed off. In what? He gave her a solemn look. In killing me, he stated abruptly.